SonicLAB
TV.
Hello and welcome to another SonicLAB. Today we're looking at the Ableton Push surface. I've got one here. Very hard to come by still because the demand is great for it. There's been a hugely successful marketing campaign that has basically made it an incredibly desirable thing. You only get to see it in the hands of an expert, but we're fortunate enough to have one ourselves. So what is Ableton Push? Well, Ableton Push is a control surface that is designed to very tightly integrate with Live 9. In fact, that's all it works with at the moment. As you can see, there's a matrix of pads, but there's also display, knobs, dedicated buttons. The whole thing works very closely with Live 9. Live 9 has been a long-awaited update to Ableton's live software and has a lot of improvements, a lot of sort of efficiency workings, all sorts of stuff. So what you get is essentially something that allows you, or this is the idea anyway, to work on live, to create without actually using or looking at the laptop. And I wonder if that's necessarily the case. We'll take a look at that. But first, let's take a look at the hardware. So we've got it here on the rotaty cake stand. The first thing that you notice when you get it out of the box is it is just built like a tank. It feels like it's extremely high quality. There's nothing sort of about it that feels cheap. It feels like that you can pound it and it's just going to work and last. And that's one thing that I really do commend them on. In fact, if you look here, it's actually made by Akai, engineered by Akai to Ableton specifications. We've got 2 foot switch inputs, power and USB. I can actually power it off the USB. I'm not using the power here. And one other nice little touch, there's this beautiful little metal on-off switch, which is just a really high quality, and it's a sort of indicator of the quality of components. Coming round to the top panel, obviously we have the 64 pressure and velocity sensitive backlit buttons. If we go here, they all have, you know, multi-colour LED behind them. These are solid. I think they're actually quite thick. They add to the mass. They go quite far down into the unit and give a really good sort of account of themselves when you hit them. At the top here, we've got this row of 16 buttons which have a more positive press feel, and again are backlit and depending on what the function that they are. At the top, we've got 8 rotary encoders above the display, which basically give you access to whatever parameters are displaying on here depending on the mode that you're in. The 9th one is for the master volume, so you can just turn down the entire mix quite easily. Various dedicated buttons with backlights, sort of backlit legend with LEDs. I must say some of them are brighter than others depending on what mode you're in, and when you're sort of standing back, it's actually quite hard to see what's written on some of them. It would be nice to be able to access the brightness level on some of these, but you can't actually do that as the unit is at the moment. And we've got a ribbon controller, swing and tempo knobs up here. And then over this side, we've got all the various different mode switches, lots of dedicated buttons. Then down here, we've got the repeat mode. So if I switch it into repeat mode, the beat divisions for the repeat mode. If I'm in session view, they represent a sort of clip launch, the scene launch down the side here. We've got cursors and arrows for getting about the place so we can navigate around the arrangement. And the clips will show up on the grid, color-coded as they are on the arrange page. I have to say that overall, I can't stress how quality it feels. It really, when you get it out of the box, you kind of go, ooh. It's so unusual these days to find something built to such a high standard and sort of feel like it's a really substantial piece of equipment. So well done to Ableton and Akai for sort of sticking to the kind of, we want it to feel quality and not cutting corners there. So now if I come into live, I'm in track mode, I go to session mode quickly, you can see that it's hooked up and it's recognising, as in the APC40 and Launchpad and other control surfaces, the window which you're operating in is scrollable by these buttons here. And you can see it reflects the clips and the scenes, and they're colour-coded as they are on the actual screen. So a quick note about these mode buttons. Basically there are 6 of them. We start off in the volume mode. If I press the volume mode, then I've got rotary encoders for the 8 tracks that are currently displaying on the grid. The last one is the volume. That always actually is master volume. If we go into pan and send, I got pan, send A, send B, and it just scrolls and rotates through each of them. If we go to track mode, the currently selected track, volume, pan, send A, send B, and then presumably other sends. If we go to clip mode, I've got the loop start, the position, and the length, and the loop setting for each available clip, for each selected clip. Then if I go to device, I've got access to the parameters associated with that device. So speaking of which, right here I've got my device. This is a clip made from Mom's Piano, which is a free download from Afro DJ Mac. I'll go and get it from his site. So what I can do is I can access the individual macro controls, but I can go deeper if I want. So now if I press this button, I'm actually focusing on the different elements within that rack. You can see analog triangle, Mom's Piano, so it flips between them. If I want to add a separate device, say I want to add an effect to it, I press the Add Effect button, and then Browse is highlighted, and this gives me all of the effects that I might want here. So say for instance I'm going to take a chorus, that's the bank switch, then I've got all the different presets of chorus. I could just say we'll do a let's try that one, Yo Man, and we'll hit load. Now I go back to my device, I've got Yo Man, and I've got the access to the individual parameters of that program plugin as well. So far I've not touched or really kind of interacted with the computer at all, so far so good. So if I now come to a more traditional keyboard voicing, this is just a grand piano. We can talk a bit about the layout of the keyboard. Now I'm in C, and the 64 pads are basically in the key of C. Now what I found is you go up in threes if you want to play a scale, so you could. And you can play quite fast, and if you want to play triads. Now I'll be honest, I'm a keyboard player, so when I play a keyboard I'm used to, my muscle memory is taking me to certain chord shapes. With this I haven't really got a clue what I'm doing, and in some ways that could be seen as a disadvantage, certainly if I wouldn't want to turn up at a gig and be asked to play along with a bunch of people who are already playing. But what it allows me in a composition mode is to create very unusual and different chord voicings and riffs that I wouldn't ordinarily play. I have to use my ears to see what I think is going to sound good, and that's quite a positive. It makes you play in a very different way than you would normally do, so that actually gives you a kind of essentially a new style or a new sound. But after time, you're going to learn, what the shapes are, and then you'll be able to be more fluent, as with any instrument. I've got the lovely Sonic Charge Synth plugin running as a VST instrument here, which is something I really like. And one thing I did notice is that actually responds very much to modulation data. Now, not pressure, but the only thing I can actually send, as far as I can tell from this, is pitch bend. There is no obvious way to send modulation data unless perhaps I'm at pressure to modulation, but as it comes out of the box I can't seem to sort of access a mod wheel type function. Also, when in browse mode, I also noticed that you cannot browse the VST or AU plugins, only the internal Ableton stuff, which means that basically if I want to instantiate an external plugin, I have to go to the computer for that. A couple of things just to notice: if you want to change the scale, you press scales and you can go into major or minor up the scale wheel. There's also a chromatic mode, if that's what you want to use. I personally can't really handle that because it means I'm even less likely to play anything good on this. There's also, if you press and hold user, you can change the velocity curve. I mean, it is very responsive, but I found I had to whack it a bit hard to get full velocity, so I went up to log 3, which just seemed to fit my playing style a little better. So I can also use the repeat button to a good effect as well. I'm on 16s here, just a piano, and I'm using the pressure to create a sort of rhythm effect. So just using the repeat function there, I can play some things that I would find very difficult to play on a regular keyboard. So if I now come into drum mode, what we've got here is a layout that is quite unique to Push, I must say. So we've got 16 pad triggers. We can bang up and down between the available sounds within this instrument. So now up here is the step sequencer. So my bass drums, my rim shots, my hi-hats, and they're positioned within the sequence. So if I play my sequence, this is just a 1-bar sequence, I can add additional events into the system. Another thing that's pretty cool, if I don't like a particular event and I want to edit it, I press and hold, and I can change the position, the note length and the velocity. So there we go, I'm nudging the position and I've got control over the velocity as well. Note length is not going to really be appropriate for a one-shot sample in this case. Now, if I don't want to use the velocity sensitivity of these pads, I can hit the accent button and I get one-shot fixed velocity, which is great for sort of consistent bass drum and snare drumming hits. What's quite neat about this though is the ability to work with patterns within patterns, and that's quite an interesting concept. So what I have here is, if I go to clip mode, this represents one bar, another bar, another bar, another bar, and I can change the length of the loop here. So if I go to a pattern that hasn't got anything in it, let's say this one, and now I press play, I switch my metronome on. Got nothing going on, but I'm going to put some bass drums in. And now perhaps I want to add some hi-hats. I'm going to use the repeat. So I go to hi-hat mode, hi-hat's there. I'm going to record. And my pressure is affecting the velocity. So now I have that pattern and this pattern and this pattern, and I can just flip between them very easily. Again, all of this has been achieved without touching the laptop at all. And this is where it's very clever, because what's actually happening here is we're not using anything but our creative brain, because I'm using the interface. So it's all motor skills. It's all down to playing and touch and feel. I'm not really thinking about where my cursor is, where I've got to click, all of those things. This is actually, it allows me to continue to work in a very creative workflow. And that is quite a unique experience in terms of you working with a computer. So it's not all perfect, much as I'm enthusing about this. There are some limitations. Primarily, if you look at this layout here, I'd really like to be able to actually have 16 pads plus 16 pads and maybe just the steps up here. So therefore I could play all of the sounds, or at least two banks of sounds, from within the drum instrument. Vice versa, I'd like to be able to perhaps switch into this mode for drums so I could access lots and lots of voices at the same time and just play things live into them. And by the same token, I'd like to be able to use step or pattern mode for playing in chords and other notes and sequencing things that way. So far, we've been looking at the kind of virtual instrument side of things, but we want to try and record some real audio. So what we have to do is press and hold the add track button and then select audio. So now I've got my audio track here, which you can see. I've got record ready, that I've got my bass. I can switch the monitoring on and off. What I can't do is affect the input or make it a mono track or any of those things. That's a little bit disappointing. I can't get to that on the without getting involved in the computer. And in practice, what this means is I can't very easily set up multiple inputs from the control surface. If I've got more than one instrument or more than one musician involved in the session, I have to go to the computer and mess about and set the input for them, and you know, that kind of stuff can't be done from the control surface. So now I just play my clip and go into record. That's fine. Say I don't like that though, I can press the delete key here and it will delete that clip. And this is actually pretty cool because it means that I can record, I can delete, I can undo, and there's other ways I can use the delete key which weren't so immediately obvious. Say I want to get rid of that effect that I've added on the bass. I press the delete key and select it here, and then it's gone from the rack. I can also undo if I want as well. So if I go back to my track mode and say I want to delete that clip, got the same deal here, delete, undo. So that again gives me functionality that means I don't have to look at the computer. So there's actually one mode left that we need to look at, and that is user mode. If I hit user mode here, I've got a MIDI monitor. You can see there are two ports for the push surface. There's the live port and the user port. When you switch into user mode, these pads transmit all the note value and pressure, but on a separate MIDI port. Same with all of these buttons. They've all got a little bit of something to transmit. These are fixed as far as I know, and you're going to have to learn from within your program. Maybe you want to learn something in Ableton or control some external devices. It just means you've got access to a separate layer of MIDI stuff that comes out of here. The only thing I don't like about this is obviously there's no visual feedback whatsoever. It just goes inert and dead. It'd be nice to be able to program up some information in this thing and have some lights go on and what have you. Apparently it is possible to program that functionality if you want to get into the Max for MSP patch creation or editing the raw Python scripts, but it's sort of pretty hardcore programming stuff and not something that's easily configurable by a novice. So that's pretty much what Push is, as from a reviewer's point of view. Obviously Ableton are releasing, you know, how-to videos. There's actually quite a lot of tutorial. In fact, the last few days they've released 5 or 6 videos that have much deeper how to do this, how to do that with it. So worth checking out if you want some really sort of in-depth tutorials. From my point of view, I was actually pretty impressed with it. I mean, I think as an integrated system with Live, it's pretty much the most comprehensive one there is, and so it should be, because it's been made by Ableton, and Ableton have kind of tied it very tightly with the Live 9 environment, and they want you to kind of consider it as almost an extension of the software, so you don't have to think about it. Now, obviously, there are a few issues. It's not perfect. I would like to have seen a few more integrating points, like, you know, being able to set the inputs and outputs for individual channels, so that makes setting up for multiple recording is easy. But maybe that's something that can be changed in a future software update. I should imagine so. Also in user mode, the fact that as it comes out of the box, it displays no kind of information or feedback at all, means that for people who want to maybe use it with other pieces of software or other external plugins or whatever, it's going to be a bit of a torturous task to program it up. I'm sure all of this stuff is going to be addressable as people kind of bring libraries online, and, you know, that I'm sure Ableton will be able to address this. The other thing was the fact that I couldn't instantiate AU and VST plugins from the browse window. They just didn't show up in that list. Although once I had instantiated them via the computer, I can edit them fine via the rotary encoders and all the parameter shifting. That's okay. The other thing was no modulation wheel. That's kind of got to be something that you're going to need from time to time, I would think. It's a sort of standard controller. But I'm hoping and supposing that all of these things are things that Ableton can fix in future updates as they develop the platform. So you can't buy this on its own. It comes bundled with Ableton software of different flavors. The entry level is featuring Ableton's Intro, and if you've already got Ableton Live 9, then that's your sort of entry point. That's how much it's going to cost you to get hold of Push, and that's 429 UK pounds. Other currencies will be displayed below. Next level up is just Ableton Live Standard, and that's 668 UK pounds, and then the full Ableton Live 9 suite is 863 UK pounds. So they've dropped the price a little bit. So stock is still rather limited. I'm told there are more shipments coming soon, so hopefully that waiting list will go down, but you're probably still at a position where you might need to pre-order. Obviously, that's going to change over time. For me though, what this offers is it really makes sense of the live environment to me. I come from a background which is more Logic and sort of linear, non-linear DAW, and this has really kind of galvanized the workflow for me within Live. I understand it because I didn't really kind of get my head around it properly before. So they've done a great job for that, and also, you know, for inputting data, it's fantastic. I'm not so sure about the pads. I mean, I like the idea of using it for unusual voicings or whatever. I would have maybe liked to have seen a USB hub so I could plug a MIDI keyboard in there quite easily, because I'm going to need another USB port, certainly on my Mac, for an audio interface, because it doesn't have that built in. But I guess that might come at a future date. But if you are a Live user, you're probably gagging to get your hands on this. And I can tell you really now that it's worth the wait, and it's worth checking out. Even at the sort of premium price, it still offers so much more integration. It sort of opens up an entirely new dimension to working compositionally within Live.